Scary telling.
I stumbled out of the bar, feeling a little tipsy from the drinks I'd had. My friend John was walking beside me, laughing and joking as we made our way down the deserted street. The night was dark, and the only sound was the echoing of our footsteps on the pavement. Despite the darkness, I felt a sense of freedom and possibility that I rarely experienced in my everyday life. It was as if anything was possible, and the world was our oyster. "Can you believe it, man?" John said, grinning from ear to ear. "We're young, we're free, and the future is ours for the taking." I laughed and nodded, feeling the same sense of excitement and wonder. We talked about our plans for the future, about the dreams we had and the things we wanted to accomplish. It was a magical moment, and I felt grateful to be alive and experiencing it. The streets were deserted, and there was no one around to witness our joy and exuberance. It was as if we were the only two people in the world, free to do as we pleased without fear of judgment or retribution. As we walked, I looked up at the night sky, marveling at the beauty of the stars. They twinkled like diamonds, illuminating the darkness and filling me with a sense of awe and wonder. "Look at the stars, John," I said, pointing upward. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" John looked up and nodded, a sense of reverence in his eyes. "Yeah, they are. It's like they're telling us something, you know?" I nodded, feeling a sense of connection to something greater than myself. It was as if the universe was speaking to us, telling us that anything was possible if we just believed in ourselves and our dreams. We continued walking down the deserted street, our laughter and conversation filling the night air. It was a perfect moment, a moment of pure happiness and joy that I would never forget. Little did I know, that moment would soon come to an abrupt end. As we continued down the deserted street, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. They blocked our path, and I felt my heart begin to race with fear. The figure was tall and intimidating, their face obscured by the darkness. They held a gun in their hand, and I felt a sense of panic grip me as I realized the danger we were in. "Give me your wallets," the figure said, their voice cold and menacing. I fumbled for my wallet, feeling a sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. I had heard stories of muggings and shootings in the city, and I knew that this was a dangerous situation. John handed over his wallet quickly, his hands shaking with fear. I tried to do the same, but my nerves got the better of me. My wallet slipped out of my hand, hitting the pavement with a loud thud. The figure's eyes narrowed, and I knew we were in trouble. They raised their gun, and I felt a sense of impending doom wash over me. "Please, don't shoot us," I said, my voice trembling with fear. But it was too late. The figure fired 2 shots, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. I stumbled backward, my head spinning with shock and disbelief. John screamed, his eyes wide with horror. I felt another shot ring out, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the cold, hard pavement. My chest felt like it was on fire, and I struggled to breathe. I saw John lying beside me, bleeding and motionless. Tears filled my eyes as I realized the gravity of the situation. We had been mugged and shot, and I wasn't sure if either of us would make it out alive. The shadowy figure was nowhere to be seen, and I felt a sense of anger and betrayal wash over me. How could someone be so heartless as to shoot 2 innocent people over a few dollars? As the ambulance arrived and rushed us to the hospital, I felt a sense of despair and hopelessness. Our carefree night had turned into a nightmare, and I wasn't sure if I would ever feel safe or happy again. The shadowy figure haunted my thoughts, their cold, menacing voice echoing in my mind. I knew that they had changed my life forever, and I wondered if I would ever be able to come to terms with what had happened. As I lay on the pavement, my body racked with pain, I struggled to make sense of what had just happened. John lay motionless beside me, his breathing shallow and labored. I heard footsteps in the distance, and I knew that someone had called for an ambulance. But it felt like an eternity before they arrived, the sound of their sirens cutting through the stillness of the night. As they rushed us to the hospital, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew that we were in serious trouble and that our lives would never be the same again. The doctors worked quickly, stabilizing us as best they could. But it was clear that we had both been seriously injured, the bullets causing damage to our internal organs and bones. I spent weeks in the hospital, recovering from the gunshot wounds. The pain was intense, and I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. As I lay in my hospital bed, I thought back to the night of the shooting. I remembered the shadowy figure, their cold, menacing voice, and the sound of the gunshots ringing out in the darkness. I wondered who they were and why they had done what they did. Was it a random act of violence, or had they targeted us for some reason? As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to recover from my injuries. But the emotional scars were harder to heal, the trauma of the shooting haunting my thoughts and dreams. I became afraid to leave my house, fearing that something similar would happen again. The streets that had once seemed so full of life and possibility now seemed dark and foreboding, the shadows holding hidden dangers and threats. I struggled with depression and anxiety, unable to shake the feeling of impending doom that seemed to follow me everywhere I went. The nightmares were the worst, the shadowy figure appearing in my dreams and haunting me with their cold, dead eyes. It took months of therapy and counseling before I began to feel like myself again. But even then, the memories of the shooting lingered, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the dangers that lurked around every corner. As I looked back on that fateful night, I knew that my life would never be the same again. The shots in the night had changed everything, leaving me forever scarred and haunted by the shadowy figure that had caused so much pain and suffering. As I recovered from the gunshot wounds, the memories of the shooting continued to haunt me. But they were not the only memories that came flooding back. I began to have vivid dreams and nightmares of a bleeding-eyed, open-mouthed figure that had haunted my childhood. As a child, I had been terrified of this creature, and I had often woken up in a cold sweat after dreaming about it. But now, the figure seemed more familiar to me than ever before. It was as if the shooting had unlocked something in my subconscious, and the figure had returned to haunt me once again. I talked to my therapist about the dreams, and she suggested that they were a manifestation of my fears and anxieties. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to them, something deeper and more sinister. As I delved deeper into my memories, I began to recall other traumas and incidents from my childhood. There had been times when I had felt unsafe and vulnerable, times when I had feared for my life and well-being. The memories were painful and difficult to confront, but I knew that I needed to face them head-on if I was ever going to heal from the trauma of the shooting. With the help of my therapist, I began to unpack the memories and emotions that had been buried deep within me. I talked about my fears and anxieties, my hopes and dreams, and the things that had brought me joy and happiness. It was a long and difficult process, but slowly, I began to feel like myself again. The nightmares of the bleeding-eyed figure grew less frequent, and I felt a sense of peace and calm begin to settle over me. But there was still a sense of unease and foreboding that lingered, a feeling that there was something I was missing, something I needed to confront if I was ever going to be truly free. As I looked back on my childhood memories, I realized that the bleeding-eyed figure had been a constant presence in my life, even before the shooting. It was as if they had always been there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce when I least expected it. I didn't know what it all meant, but I knew that I needed to find out. The memories and nightmares were a part of me, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. I needed to face my fears and confront the bleeding-eyed figure once and for all. As I confronted the memories of the bleeding-eyed figure and began to work through my fears and anxieties, a sense of peace began to settle over me. I felt like I was finally able to move forward and leave the trauma of the shooting behind. But that sense of peace was short-lived. One night, as I was walking home from the grocery store, I saw a shadowy figure emerge from the darkness. It was the same figure that had mugged and shot me and John all those months ago. My heart began to race with fear, and I felt a sense of panic grip me. The figure raised their gun, and I knew that I was in serious trouble. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if I was stuck in a nightmare, unable to escape the terror that was closing in on me. The figure fired their gun, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. Everything went black, and I thought that this was it, the end of the line. But then, I woke up in my bed, sweating and shaking with fear. It had all been a nightmare, a terrifying reminder of the trauma that had changed my life forever. As I lay in bed, trying to calm my racing heart, I realized that the shooting had left me forever scarred and haunted. The bleeding-eyed figure had been a part of my life all along, and now I knew that I could never escape it. The final flash of the gun in my nightmare was a reminder that the danger was still out there, waiting to strike when I least expected it. But I also knew that I had the strength and resilience to face it head-on, to confront my fears and anxieties and emerge stronger on the other side. The trauma of the shooting had left me forever changed, but it had also taught me the value of life and the importance of resilience and perseverance. I knew that I would never forget the horror of that night, but I also knew that I would never let it define me. As I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of calm and peace wash over me. The final flash of the gun had been a terrifying reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness, but it had also been a reminder of the strength and resilience that lay within me. And that was something that could never be taken away.